Today we're going to talk about the legislature. Always one of our favorite topics because it's thrilling and exciting to watch them at work. Actually, it's more terrifying. At any rate, we are really pleased to have Devon Graham with us today. And she is the Assistant State Director. And fortuitously, she lives in Tallahassee, very adjacent to the legislature. Uh, Devon was raised just outside of Pittsburgh in an evangelical Christian household, the grasp of which she has only recently freed herself in 2016. She still maintains a slight Yinzer accent, and I'm not sure what that is, but we'll find out. With a PhD in toxicology, works right in with the legislature. From the University of Maryland, she is currently a faculty member at a nearby unnamed university, researching the development and treatment of neuropsychiatric disorders. When she's not playing with her mice and begging for grant funding, she is busy raising her two children to be functioning, free-thinking members of society. And so I'm looking forward greatly, as I know we all are, to hearing her comments. And Devon, it's up to you.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. I am going to try not to break out my Yinzer accent at all because it's really bad. If anyone has ever heard of a Pittsburgh talk, it's just not pretty. So yeah, I'm going to actually just start my slideshow here. I'm going to share, where am I at? Here we go. And so when I do this, I'm probably not going to be able to monitor the chat or anything. I want to keep this really super casual. So if you have questions, seriously, just, I won't be able to see the chat probably. So just feel free to just jump in, or I don't know if Judy or Jim are going to monitor that. It's totally fine. So can everyone see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a lot of it, actually,
yes,
entirely.
I'm here. I listen once I hear the wake words.
I'm going to talk today about the 2021 Florida Legislative Session, which we are about to enter this year. So as Jim said, I'm Devon Graham. I am the Assistant State Director with American Atheists here in Tallahassee. I am the current president of our local humanist group, the Humanists of Tallahassee, or HOT. So yeah, I'm just gonna start with that. Here we go. Okay, Jim already actually did my background, but I'm just gonna go quickly into this. I was raised in a really small town outside of Pittsburgh. We like to call it the honorary 12th state of the Confederacy because it was very extremely backwards. Even though it was north of the Mason-Dixon line. I didn't go very far for college. I went to Allegheny College up in northwestern Pennsylvania, got a degree in biology, and then I fled to Baltimore, where I worked as a lab tech at the University of Maryland med school campus in Baltimore. I then transferred into the PhD program in toxicology. I did my research at the National Institute on Drug Abuse, which is part of the NIH. And I got my PhD working with methamphetamine neurotoxicity, did a brief stint at the EPA before going to Cincinnati, which is very, very Pittsburghy. And I got a postdoc there at Cincinnati Children's, again, working with drugs of abuse and environmental toxins, but specifically in regards to development, so how things in utero can affect long-term function. I then did a second postdoc at Vanderbilt, again, building on those topics and then moving more into other neuropsychiatric disorders like anxiety and depression before moving to, well, I'm not supposed to say where I teach, but oh well. It's there. Before moving to Tallahassee, it was exactly 6 years ago today that I moved to Florida. So it's a big day, at least according to Facebook, it was the 6-year anniversary. So yeah, so I have a lab here at the College of Medicine. Again, still working with developmental toxicity, particularly in regards to behavior, but also treatments for neuropsychiatric disorders. And I need to say that I am a state employee, and what I'm saying here is not representative of my employer, the state of Florida, or anyone but me. So I want to talk a little bit about the Florida Legislature. As I just said, I have a scientific background. I do not have any legal background. I do not have a background in government or politics, nothing. So this was something I never, other than maybe like growing up and listening to my parents listen to Rush Limbaugh and like other right-wing nut jobs, that's the extent of my political activism. So learning about the Florida legislative process was a real experience for me. As Jim said, I deconverted after I had moved to Florida about in 2016, give or take. And I was just really, Trump was elected. I felt really, unable to I just felt really impotent. Like I couldn't do anything. Everything felt like it was just falling apart around me. And so Jim Helton from American Atheists, he was the national field director at the time, was coming through Florida and was recruiting people to work with American Atheists. And I just thought I'd just go to his talk and see what would happen. And I became assistant state director in 2019. So it's been about 2 years I've been doing this now. And I figured I used to do a lot of community service. And I thought that would be my focus as community service. But some really bad bills were coming through in 2020. And I figured I might as well just try and see what it's like to speak in front of the legislature. Why not? Try everything once. And so last legislative session, there was a couple bills actually, but this one was specifically about to amend the statute, which is Florida Statute 1003.45. That number will be forever ingrained in my mind. The statute's titled Permitting the Study of the Bible and Religion, Permitting a Brief Meditation Period. Dennis Baxley and Kim Daniels, who we all know is the former rep out of Jacksonville. She was the exorcist, the demon exorcist. They introduced a bill requiring the moment of silence in public schools. So instead of it's already permitted if a child wants to take 1 to 2 minutes in the morning at a public school to just collect themselves, it's totally fine. But this would be a requirement for everyone. And the bill was written in such a way that there really were no guidelines. And given the fact that this is Florida and we do tend to lean conservatively, it would not be at all surprising if a teacher pushed for a child to go towards the more Christian prayer or influence the children to do this. This is something that happened actually in West Virginia a couple years back, where this was an option, and there was a secular child and she was thrown into a closet pretty much and not allowed out, and was harassed by students because she didn't want to participate in the prayer or the meditation. And so this is me testifying. I did it a few times and I kind of got the bug. I just really fell in love with doing this. So this is my jam now. I love legislative activism. As you can see, Dennis Baxley is here in the bottom right-hand corner. He was never happy when I testified. Lori Berman, who is a secular saint, is right beside him, and I love her. She is a huge proponent of church-state separation, and she supported like things that we would ask for. So I really appreciate her support on that. Okay, so a friend of mine, I must admit that the Atheists of Florida is probably one of the more politically active groups that I've spoken to. So you probably know a lot of this stuff, but I do want to go over a little bit of background on the legislative process. You are free to stop me and just tell me to move on. And I'm fine with that. But a friend of mine who's a lobbyist, a policy director, said very rightly so that Florida legislative process is like a brick wall. You're not supposed to move beyond it. Like once you learn something, you're going to hit a brick wall, and they don't want you to know what else you need to do after that to figure it out. It's very difficult for anyone that's not in the process to to get it, I guess. And even those people that are in it, they are not, they still are like surprised every year, like, I didn't know we could do this. This is brand new to me. So that's why I just want to briefly go over the process here. Okay, so we swear in our legislators in November, and then we have a 60-day session in Florida, even though it actually is kind of a lot longer than that. This year, because it's an odd year, we'll be meeting they start on the first Tuesday, the first Monday. So March 2nd is our first day of legislative session, so it's coming up. In even years, it starts in January. They are 60 days and 60 days only, unless there's a special session or the budget hasn't been approved or something along those lines. Bills can be filed prior to Election Day if you're a senator and you're not up for re-election, but all bills must be filed by the first day. So as of March 2nd, all your bills must be filed. And this is going to be important considering that it's just the end of January right now. So we still have a lot of time. If a lot of groups are always interested in filing bills, like like medical aid in dying or something along those lines, you can't do that. Florida's one of the states where citizens are not allowed to file bills, but your representatives can. So this is why it's really important to get to know your local reps and build a relationship with them. Bills are, once they're filed, they go through multiple committees, usually at least 3. What committees they're assigned to is up to leadership, which in this case is the Republican side on both houses and both chambers. So there are exceptions. High priority bills may only have to go to 1 committee. If you are really hated by leadership or you have a really unpopular bill, you may have to go through 7 committees, which is something that's been done in the past. And for a bill to become a law, it has to pass both the House and the Senate. So so if everyone's really excited for March 2nd here in Tallahassee, because it's like that's when all the excitement happens. But honestly, most of the work is already done by the time session starts, because we have committee weeks, and this has been a little bit messed up this year because of COVID. Usually there are 6 week-long sessions that start not long after inauguration or swearing in November, up until the first day of session, and committees will meet during this time. So they'll discuss bills that have been filed already. They can scope out the political landscape, and they vote on these bills. So committees are voting on these bills. I'm actually going next week for what is the 3rd committee week. We just finished the 2nd one. We are starting the 3rd committee week next week, and I'm actually going to be testifying on a bill already before session even starts. So committee weeks are just like the real session. The only difference is that the full bodies can't meet. So the Senate can't meet in chambers and the House can't meet in chambers. The committees are only allowed to meet. So it's really important that people understand that the session doesn't start on the first day of session. It starts weeks and months prior. So what can we expect? We were very fortunate. I'm going to admit my biases here. I am very progressive and left-leaning. We were very fortunate from a national level that we got rid of Trump, you could say, and we saw a lot of we saw a lot of change happen in the makeup of the House and the Senate. On Florida, that was quite the opposite. We lost a lot of really progressive, pro separation of church and state advocates this past year in the legislature, including Jose Javier Rodriguez out of Miami. That election scandal is really amazing and bizarre to read about. It's like they had the false candidates running against him. I'm still a little hazy on it. We lost a lot of other ones too from other places in Florida, like Jennifer Webb and Cindy Polo. So we actually lost a lot of ground in Florida when it comes to church-state separation advocacy and more progressive type causes. So we are absolutely on the defense this year, which we expect in Florida, but it's even more so. So while the Senate's a little more evenly divided between Dems and Republicans. Although there are way more Republicans, the House is much more more biased towards the Republican side. And okay, so the 2021 legislative session. So things that we were kind of predicting that would come through, and we're beginning to see a lot of this come to fruition, is a lot of backlash from the Supreme Court decisions that happened earlier this year. So Espinoza, I'll talk about Bostock. So Bostock was one of those decisions that went through the Supreme Court, and that was allowed in employment circles, in the realm of employment, gender and gender identity became protected classes, which is really great. So what we were kind of expecting is to see a lot of backlash and religious exemptions coming through, so that businesses would not have to recognize the LGBTQ folks as a protected class. One thing that's not, so we did see Espinoza was another one that was a really sad loss for us. So it was pretty much public funding, taxpayer funding can go more towards private schools, religious schools. And that's, Florida is very bizarre when it comes to education. I've learned there's been a history of taxpayer funding going to charter schools and religious schools, and that wasn't, I don't think Espinoza is going to change much in Florida, except for making the politicians maybe a little more bullish about it. But along those same lines, we know that every year we see a ton of bills that are all about protection of the children. And a lot of these bills are actually just trying to protect kids from everything and everyone that's not their parents, I guess, or not their God. So I'm gonna go into a lot of these today. So, so education is always something that's going to be big in Florida. Bills that target education and the desecration of public schools. Sorry, my dog's here in the background. If he makes noises, I apologize. There's going to be a lot of attacks on LGBTQ, specifically trans kids. Parental rights is another thing that sounds really great in theory, but it's actually quite bad, and I'll go into that a little bit more. This is something that went through last year and was really close to passing, but this year it's probably going to pass. So I'm going to cover kind of 3 categories of bills that I put together, and I'm going to categorize them as good or bad. As was mentioned earlier, I'm from Pittsburgh, and so if they're bad, they're going to get the Mr. Yuck sticker, which was invented by my pediatrician, Dr. Moriarty, actually, so it's a Pittsburgh thing. If they're bad, they get the Mr. Yuck sticker. If they're good, they're going to get the Eaton Park smiley face cookie sticker. So 3 categories of bills that I'm going to review. And so the first one are just outright violations of the separation of church and state. We actually don't see that many of these. The politicians are much more sly, I guess, in covering these up. But there are some of these have already been put through in the years past. So these are actually all very bad. There's, I'm not going to read the numbers, and I'm going to actually make a list, a spreadsheet. My schedule is really hectic the past couple of weeks. So I'm gonna put something together, and I can send these to you. So there's no need to like write these down or memorize them or anything. So in both the House, the Senate, and just this past week, the House, they putting through the moment of silence bill, which was what I was advocating against last year. So this would require moment of silence to occur in public schools. And there's, I've kind of talked about why it's bad, but it takes away from educational time. I think someone calculated it's like 2 days of class time a year is taken away just by having a mandatory moment of silence, which is not necessary because children are already allowed to do that if they so choose. There's another set of bills, both in the House and the Senate. Remember, they have to be passed by both chambers in order to become a law. And this involves guns in religious institutions. They almost got this through last year, I believe, but I'm not really sure why they do this, but it's for people who have a concealed carry license to be able to carry their guns into church, because that's where they need most protecting. It's just bizarre, but we are monitoring that. And there's also this set of bills, which is very pertinent to our pandemic time here. It's about the civil liability for damages related to COVID. And what you're going to see is politicians pushing this as we're trying to protect small businesses from being liable from these egregious lawsuits. So a mom and pop store has an employee who caught COVID on the job. They don't want that mom and pop store to go into bankruptcy or, have to shut down their business because they have this lawsuit on their hands. But it's being framed in that sense, but it's also protecting large businesses like Publix and Hobby Lobby and some places that, I guess Publix did a decent job for them, kind of, I think. But a lot of places did not. They chose not to protect their employees, and now they want to not be liable for their employees catching COVID on the job, and they didn't give those employees the special PPE that they needed or take precautions. One interesting caveat is they're including religious institutions within this bill. And if we learned anything in 2020 is that like some of the biggest COVID super spreader site instances were Supreme Court justice nomination parties and church services. So most places that did have COVID restrictions always had a religious exemption. And so churches were allowed to have indoor services and the like. They didn't have to have the 20 people max in a building. They weren't restricted to that. And so now, even because churches did not take these precautions, they are now no longer going to be liable for their parishioners getting sick and dying. So I think that's just egregious. No, that's something we are absolutely monitoring as well. The second category is education. And there were a lot of, as I said before, Florida has a history of bad educational bills. And I think a lot of these ones I'm going to be discussing first, which are very good actually. And I think we need to make a point to promote the good bills and not just like fight the bad ones. We have a lot of good bills coming through. And I think these are in response to some of the bad bills that went through last year. And also I think it was the Orlando Sentinel that had an amazing investigative report last year about private religious schools that got millions of dollars in state funding, but their teachers didn't have GEDs, the buildings were falling apart, there was no curriculum, there was abuse going on, there's just no regulation over these private schools, and yet they're getting all this taxpayer money. And so a lot of this is in response to that. So some of the ones that I'm very happy about are in the Senate is SB 600, which is if a private school wants to be eligible for step-up funding or state funding, scholarship funding, they have to have an anti-discrimination policy in place. They have to have the same policies that public schools do in order to get that money. We know that a lot of religious schools that are already getting the scholarship funding do discriminate against LGBTQ families, do discriminate against families with single moms or, divorced parents. It's just not right. Another one that's in the House is educator conduct. So there will be, this is putting a list of teachers of bad seeds pretty much across the state. So if there's a teacher that's fired from a private or public school for certain reasons, they're going to be on this list. So you can check to see if your teacher is qualified or has had problems in the past. Another one in the Senate is just titled education because they don't know how to title bills. This is having a minimum teacher requirement for both private and public schools. So they would have to have a bachelor's degree. Private schools will have to have the same state assessments as public schools. Private schools will also have to allow recess, which some kids don't have recess in their private schools. And their facilities will have to be up to code as well, which is in response to that Orlando Sentinel investigation. If you'll notice, those three bills don't have companion bills in the other chamber, so they're very unlikely to go through. But these two do, and the next two do, and they've actually been picked up by committees, so they are moving forward at least. And so the first one is providing menstrual hygiene products in public schools for free. This tends to be, not having hygiene products has been a barrier to education in many places, especially in lower income schools and places. So I think this is a great bill that we should support. And then this next one is requiring lessons in Holocaust history and African American history in both public and private schools. And I'm going to go into why this is really important on the next one, which are the bad education bills. The first one is Parental Bill of Rights, or as a friend of mine says, the Parental Bill of Wrongs. This was extremely close to passing last year. So it's almost the same bill as last year. It passed the House. It was a few votes short in the Senate, or it died in the Senate chamber at the last minute. This is extremely problematic. So how it's phrased and how it's put forward is that parents should have a right to know what's going on in their child's education, what's going on in schools. And so a lot of the language is parents need to have a say in what the curriculum is going to be. There needs to be a process to setting up parent-teacher conferences and the like, which sounds great. I like that. But then it gets a little more devious. So some of the issues are that a child, say it's a child with, back up a little bit. One of the things is that all records related to that child must be given to the parents upon request. And you might be thinking, yeah, I want to know what my kid's grades are. I want the academic records. You already have access to that. That's not what they're going for. So say there's a child who is questioning their sexuality, maybe gay, I don't know. And they're in a home environment where that's not condoned. They may be kicked out of the home. They may be abused for their sexuality or whatever it is. And so the only person they can talk to is the school counselor. So there's supposed to be a private conversation between a student and a counselor, but the parent can request that those records be released to them. So pretty much outing their child. Those should be private. And there's a reason why the student went to the counselor. Another thing that this allows parents to do is to take their kids out of educational classes that they don't approve of. So sex ed is one, which that's kind of across the board. We see that all over the place. People don't agree with sex ed or evolution. They can take their kids out of their science class. And this is where that last bill came in last year. One of the senators, I believe it was Lori Berman, asked a proponent of this bill, so if a parent is a Holocaust denier, are they allowed to take their child out of history class? And they had to say yes. If they're a Holocaust denier and they don't want their child learning about the Holocaust, then they can take their kid out of class. So that's where the required bill, I think, from the previous slide, the required Holocaust African American history courses were, I think that's where that came from. So Parental Bill of Rights is problematic in terms of privacy for students. The next one is one of Governor Ron DeSantis's legislative priorities, and this is called Intellectual Freedom in Post-Secondary Education. Pretty much saying that we can't, we're not allowed to censor conservative voices. And I work on a college campus. Conservative voices are not being censored. Those ideas are out there. They're just not as popular. So it's kind of pushing an agenda, which I don't know. We can go into that argument later, but this is a priority for Republicans currently when we're in the middle of a pandemic. And finally, the last one. This is really interesting. This is kind of getting a lot of buzz lately. It's called Materials Harmful to Minors. And it's being phrased as, we don't want obscene materials in our classrooms, and we don't want kids to find, I don't know, a Playboy magazine in the school library. I don't know, which I get, but it's very subjective in its interpretations. And so one of the analyses, the main analyses of these is this would make Florida an opt-in only state for sex ed. There are currently 3 or 4 states in the US that have, the students have to opt in, have to parental consent in order to learn about sex ed in public schools. That's Utah, Nevada, Mississippi, and I think North Carolina. This would make Florida an opt-in state instead of an opt-out. If parents want their kids not to take sex ed, they just have to send a note saying my kid's not going to take this class. So that would make us opt-in only. And there's also just really bizarre verbiage in it. So for instance, breastfeeding is not considered obscene, but it is considered harmful to minors. So if there is a book discussing a mother breastfeeding, or there's pictures of it or something, that's considered harmful to minors. That is a banned book. It's just really bizarre. It's going to be problematic because the interpretation for what's obscene and what isn't is very subjective. So this is something we are monitoring and are opposing a lot. So I'm gonna get out of education, and my third category is kind of like my miscellaneous social justice bills. I know we as atheists, we should be fighting for church-state separation, and I think that's great and that we do, but I also think we need to stand by those who are discriminated against and stand, and I don't know, church-state separation isn't the only thing out there, is my point. So these are some interesting bills, and there are some good ones, actually a lot of good ones. Senator Bracy, who I had never heard of until this year, put in a ton of criminal justice bills. And I think this is where our humanism really comes into play if you're a humanist. So they involve abolishing solitary confinement. There should be restrictions and rules on how minors can be detained, banning tear gas. Police departments aren't allowed to use military surplus or buy military surplus tanks and whatnot. Abolishing the death penalty is one of them. Something else. Citizen review boards should be put in place. There should be special guidelines for officer-involved shootings that shouldn't be, investigated internally. I think it's a really great step forward in terms of relationship with police departments. There's another one that's, I think this is actually going through. It's in both House and the Senate, and it's saying that gender and gender identity are protected classes. So this would put us in line with federal statutes. So this is a good step for Florida. There's another one for the start of a new office in the governor's office, the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and also a resolution, a Senate resolution and a House bill. I don't think they discriminate. I can't even think of the word right now. They delineate between the two in the House. But this is pretty much acknowledging the state's part and apologizing for the investigations into FAMU students here in Tallahassee that were involved in the bus protest in the 60s, as well as for pretty much the lavender scare that occurred at, I believe it was at UF in the 60s as well. There was a lot of gay professors at UF who were kind of just called out and humiliated, and they lost their jobs, they lost their families, they lost everything because they were pretty much doxxed then. So it's just the state acknowledging that, my bad. There's some more good ones as well. The ratifying the ERA is up in both House and the Senate, which it's 2021. It just seems bizarre that we're still working on that. This next one is to put us more in line with federal statutes. So it's the repealing the Defense of Marriage Act. So marriages between one man and one woman, even though the law of the land is, gay marriages is totally fine. It's still in our statutes that it's still one man, one woman. There's still language like that in our laws. Another one is replacing Dixie Highway's name with Harriet Tubman Highway. Others are making Juneteenth a state holiday, which I think is really interesting. And finally, this last one, we actually have 3 Confederate holidays still on the books in Florida. They are officially recognized as state holidays. So we have the Confederate Memorial Day, Robert E. Lee Day, and Jefferson Davis Day. So that would just take those off the books. And there are, of course, some bad ones. And this is probably the one that people have been hearing about a lot of. And so this is absolutely Governor DeSantis' legislative priority, hence the reason why it has the #1 designation in the House. It's HB 1 in the House, 484 in the Senate. And this is called Combating Public Disorder. This is in response to the Black Lives Matter protest this past year. And I just think that it's most of it is just a lot of the argument about it is it goes against our constitutionally protected right to protest peacefully. And it's being phrased as people are rioting so much, but there is a religious exemption to it. So any desecration or vandalism of a religious symbol would be considered combating, it would be considered against this law. So that's something to keep in mind. Another one in both the House and the Senate is for the individual liberty and democracy. This is actually saying that democratic socialism is a very bad thing. It's not the true, quote unquote, true liberty and justice that we have in the US, which kind of takes away people's right to believe what they want. There is an abortion bill that's coming through. The title is terrible. It's the protection of a pain-capable unborn child from abortion. So it's a 20-week abortion ban. It's also there's also reporting requirements along with it that are going to require physicians to report abortions in public, like private medical info to the state, which I don't think I'm not clear on that part. There is some sort of weird reporting requirement that's going to be a huge change to what it's been in the past. And this is an interesting one. I think this is the last bill I'm going to talk about. I'm sorry if I'm boring you all, but this is just called home-based business exemptions. And this is the second year in a row this has gone through. The Senate version is by Senator Keith Perry. He put this through last year. And so Florida legislators are against home rule. So what home rule is that small communities or towns or cities should be able to rule for what's best in their small towns or communities. They know what's best and what is for their own people. The state shouldn't be coming in and dictating to them what's best. And there were a lot of bills, like preemptive bills, going through in the past few years that where the state is trying to take over control of what cities and localities, small localities, want to do within their own towns. So this is, I think, I'm kind of like just guessing a little bit on this, is in response to a lot of the bills that are going through that are anti-conversion therapy. If you read the bill, you would never get this from it. It's very vague. So a lot of localities and cities in Florida have put conversion therapy bans in place. And there's currently, they're in court fighting this now. There's even a bill that's been filed in both the House and the Senate, which we can talk about later. It's very problematic in my mind. But there are localities that do ban conversion therapy. And what this is saying, I think this is the state's way of saying that if we lose this court battle and these small towns are able to ban conversion therapy, home-based businesses, which is where the majority of conversion therapy takes place in small homes, home-based businesses, they will be exempt from public law. So what groups like Equality Florida did last year when this came through is they wrote an amendment that would take away that exception for take away the conversion therapy part. So there's language that was added to the bill that would protect the local ban on conversion therapy. So conversion therapy would still be bad. And when they filed this bill again this year, they again did not include that language. So this makes me think that this isn't just like an innocent mistake, like, oh geez, I don't know how this involves conversion therapy. They know, and they just chose not to include that language. So this is something just to watch for. I think most people wouldn't know that this was one of the goals of this bill if they weren't like really reading a lot of stuff on it. So as far as action, you guys are all, I know a lot of you are very active in the political process, but my things here are just, number one, hold your breath. We still have over a month until the start of session, and we've seen some good bills. We've also seen a lot of bad bills. There's still a lot of time for a lot of bad stuff to be filed. And it's kind of just hold on, it might be getting a lot worse. I'm gonna recommend that everyone tracks the bills that they're interested in. Both the House, the Florida House and the Florida Senate have really great, shockingly great bill tracking guides. So I think the Senate version is a little bit better, but you can track both House and Senate on each of those individual sites. But what you do is you find the bill that you're interested in, you log in, you track it, and every time something happens, like it's going to committee, it's past this committee, it's going to the next committee, you'll get emails about it. And I think it's a really great way of keeping track of what's going on with these bills. Most bills that are filed aren't going to make it to committee, and that's just the way it is. So we don't need to worry about them. But once they do make it to committee, they become our problem, or maybe the opposite of a problem. And when they do make it to committees, I think this is the time that we really start contacting our legislatures that are on these committees, even the friendly ones. Like I said, I testified against the moment of silence bill on one of the House committees last year. And I was honestly expecting the vote to be split down party lines, but because there were a lot of progressive Dems, like young, really people you thought would be against this, they voted for it to go through because why not? They just want to get out of that meeting. They want to move on. So you need to contact who you might consider a friendly as well, to make sure that they know how bad this bill is or how good this one is, and vote accordingly. And then finally, just talk the crap out of these. If we're not talking about what's going on in the House and what the underlying issues or what the analyses are on these bills, no one is going to know, because as I said, a lot of them are just phrased very vague and like, this sounds like a really great bill. I want to protect my kids. I want to know what's going on in my kids' school. But they're not so, they're often very sinister underneath. And I'm just going to go briefly on this. So American Atheists, which I'm affiliated with and the state director for, they've been investing a lot of time and effort and money into grassroots advocacy in the states. But it's also kind of draining a lot of resources that they need at the national level. And so they just started piloting this program, and we're one of the pilot states. It's called the State Legislative Action Teams, or SLATs. So they're piloting it in Florida, Oklahoma, and Virginia, because we have a lot of people there who are interested in politics and that want to get involved. And so we've identified some volunteers from across the state. So I'm the chair with myself and Sarah Ray out of the Polk County Atheists are co-chairs of this. We assembled our team. We had our first meeting last week. We're still trying to figure out what we're going to do. It's very open, and it's very, very much up to us to how we're going to proceed. But I think because a lot of the people that are involved, this is their first time doing it. They have a passion for advocacy, but they just don't know what to do. What this is going to involve this year is just learning the process and increasing engagement amongst the team members. We are in the process now of picking bills that are interested of us. Obviously, the moment of silence bill is up there. We want to prioritize those that affect secular people or separation of church and state, but we also want to look at those that have some sort of discrimination against other groups, minority groups such as LGBTQs, or even other religious minorities. We also want to prioritize good bills as well. Like, not all bills are bad. Some of them really should be commended, like they should be advocated for. And so what we plan to do is advocate for or against these chosen bills and just really spread the word about them. So if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to talk about, but we literally just started a week and a half ago. So it's very, very nascent. And finally, just thank you for listening. There's my email, my Twitter handle, you can contact me. And that's that. So with that, I hope I didn't talk too fast. And that's it. So any questions? I see there's some stuff in the chat. I don't know if I should.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay.
Devon, thank you very much. And as you indicated, the chat room may have some interesting things in it. I haven't looked, but if you
Oh boy. Okay.
find some stuff, and I'm sure you will, feel free to comment on it.
A comment about nuns from the 50s and 60s. Yep. Chief Layer. Yeah, as far as the educational requirements, I'm still shocked to this day that teachers at private schools don't have to have any, and there's no requirements. Anyone can just go in and be like, I'm going to go teach history today. It's like, okay, welcome. My 8-year-old daughter has more requirements than some of the teachers at these schools. So I see that, is it James has his hand raised?
He does indeed.
Okay.
Yep.
Just want to express my appreciation for your comments, your presentation. I thought it was very well done, required a great deal of research.
Okay.
And I am particularly impressed with the fact that most left thinking free thinkers, atheists, humanists agree with you on most all of the points. We want quality education. We want freedom from the mixing of religion with government. And we want to protect children from oppression and brainwashing. And especially they need to have comprehensive sex education, and there needs to be protections in place for them so that the religious community cannot impose itself upon them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I admit that I do lean left on a lot of things, and most people don't. A lot of these are just my personal views. Again, this is not the views of my employer or American Atheist, although they do stand for the bills that I've presented. We are encouraged to advocate for against the bills that we so choose, and usually with their approval. So I think Rick has his hand raised.
I think next is Rick Gold. Rick?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's see. He seems to
Where'd he go?
have flown the coop on us temporarily.
Well, I had something
Rick.
I wanted to, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
there's Rick. Go ahead and speak up.
Oh, we can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
No, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Rick, your mic's not working.
Something isn't working.
Well, while you're working on that, I think there's a comment from Gus about the legislative procedure. How does an activist get to speak before a committee or the legislature? So these are weird times, and normally what happens is you just come up to Tallahassee, you go to a committee meeting or whatever, and then you just fill out a speaker's form, just pretty straightforward, and then you just go speak. Usually you have to keep it 1 to 3 minutes, and that's it. But because we're in COVID, I was really, really, really hoping that because of this weird time and our reliance on Zoom, oh, sorry, that's my dog. Because of the reliance on Zoom, we would be able to have people from across the state, like kind of Zoom into these meetings and participate, which I think would be really great. I understand that there would be a lot of people across the state wanting to talk about a lot of different bills, and it would take a lot of time. But it's actually going to be a lot worse than I thought. So even us local people, so the Capitol is shut down. It has been for months. So for Senate, if we want to speak before the Senate, we have to go to the FSU Tucker Center, which is just down the road a bit, and we have to do the speaker form, and then we just speak into like a webcam, I guess, is how that works. So it's a little bit disconnected. I really like to look in the senator's eyes when I'm talking, and they know that a real person is there. But when it's on a camera, I think it's a little bit meh. As far as the House, if you would like to speak in front of a House committee, what you can do is you have to, 2 hours before the committee meets, there's like a lottery online. You have to kind of just put your name into the lottery. You get like a ticket or something, and you go to you have to go to the Capitol a couple hours in advance and show security that you are allowed in, and then they'll let you in. They only let so many people in. But I've known people who are very well known at the Capitol. They are like lobbyists for big groups. They've had their little ticket, they've shown security, and they're not let in. So it's still, and that's just for committee week. So it may be getting better when the real session starts, but I'm not that hopeful. They're really locking down of how many people can talk. So, which is, I don't think is really right, but that's that. Rick, have you gotten your
Yeah, let's see if
sound
Rick
over?
can speak.
No, I still can't hear you.
It's not coming through.
Oh, you're muted right now.
Judy Atkins would like to be recognized.
Oh.
Let's see if Rick.
Her hand function isn't working. So Jim, if you would put her on your
Right.
list.
Right. Okay, we still don't seem to be able to hear Rick. Keep on trying. That's all I can say. Well, you're muted again.
Why don't you, Rick, why don't you put it in the chat and we'll read it out for you?
Oh, that's a good
Okay.
idea. I can't see some of the chat. Is there? Is there? Who else has their hand raised? I can't find this.
Amy.
I'm sorry.
Amy has her hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, you talked earlier about, was it Slack? You called it?
Slack.
Or
SLAT.
what was it?
SLAT, State Legislative Action Teams, Advocacy. Yeah, Action Teams. Sorry.
What exactly would volunteers on that team do?
So we're still
I
trying
know
to figure this out. So part of the beauty of it is that we can do what we want with it. The bad thing is that we can do what we want with it. So there's very few guidelines. Right now we're just trying to get everyone up to speed about the process. So some of these people that are on it aren't involved in, they're atheists, but they're not involved in groups, which I think I love pulling in people like fresh meat to see, to get them involved and engaged. Just getting them acquainted with the process. Most people have a passion for it, but they don't know how the legislative process works. And so we're teaching them how to do that. We're currently choosing a couple bills that are of interest to us. So obviously the moment of silence is number one. I think the parental rights one also has a lot of implications for us. So I think that's one we're probably going to go for. We have to discuss the bills. And then with me being the only person like in Tallahassee, I'll probably be like the boots on the ground testifying against them, but it's going to involve like doing some research. Like we do have the legal team at American Atheists to help us with this, but drafting letters, trying to get local groups and educating local groups and other places, not just atheist and humanist groups, but like, you know, like a LGBTQ group or a student organization, just getting them involved and engaged in what's going on. And just, I think that's the point, is just trying to teach people what is happening. And once they know what's happening, then they're a little more engaged and they want to work to either advocate for or against these bills. So that's where it is right now. As I said, we're just starting. The two groups that are also piloting this program, Oklahoma and Virginia, their legislative session started a week or two ago. And so I haven't talked to them. I really need to see what they're up to. But I said Virginia, yeah. Virginia is very lucky in that everything is, the Dems control everything. And so what they're this year, that they're just really promoting the positive bills. They're not advocating against anything bad. They're just doing that, and which is really easy. It's really great for them because they're all noobs when it comes to this process. So I think it's a lot easier to advocate for something than really fight against it.
I think Judy is next, and followed by Gus, then Artie.
Thank you, Devin. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to say that we do have a list of bills we are following on our website, and we update it frequently because it changes frequently.
Mhm.
And I am putting together a manual for our people to understand how to go in and track a bill and how to do anything, how to contact their congressperson. And Rick Gold is asking about how open are legislators to input from people outside their district. And they are not terribly open to it, is my understanding. You can call them, but you can't really, well, maybe it's not right. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But they don't seem to be all that open to me about it.
You can absolutely call anyone you want to.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's best if you are. It says my internet connection is unstable, so if I disappear, I'll get right back on.
Okay.
Just absolutely, you can call any legislature, email any legislator that you want to. They love to hear from their own constituents, and you have the opportunity to meet them or their staffers, especially meet the staffers. The staffers are the ones that are doing the work. Meet them at their local to you office. Not necessarily, you don't have to come to Tallahassee to meet them. Engage with them. I think when it comes to a direct ask, like the committee thing, like I was saying, this really bad bill's coming to the education committee. I think sending very pointed emails and calls to everyone in that committee does make people know that, like, I may be outside your district, but this is a problem for me because of X, Y, and Z. Phone calls are always more impactful than emails or like those generic action alerts that you get from a lot of organizations, because they have to be recorded in terms of like so-and-so from the zip code called saying they are for or against this. And if you hate talking on the phone like I do, a fun tip is that you can call them after hours and it goes right to voicemail, and then in the morning they have to write all that stuff down. So if you are anti-phone like me, that's one way to do it.
Thank you. Gus?
Yes, I've got a couple of school-related questions. When it comes to this moment of silence thing, have you heard any feedback as to how it actually gets implemented? Like, are the teachers maybe encouraging the kids to meditate on certain things?
As far as implementation, so that's part of the problem with the bill. If there were specific guidelines as to how to do it, I think that would be better. But how it's written is something along the lines of teachers can have no say. They cannot tell their students how to do it. Just fine. But that's kind of it. They can send a note home saying that we're doing this. It has to be 1 to 2 minutes at the beginning of class, at the beginning of the school day. And I think the problem is just from what we've seen in other states that have tried to do this is that it's kind of like a gateway drug. Like once you get this in, they kind of start doing more asks, and it's more infringement on like minority religions and atheists. So while they do say that this is explicitly secular, you are free to do what you want, what we've seen with other places that have had to do this is that the teacher will say, bow your heads and pray, everyone, which is, I mean, that's what most religious people will do. Just like moment of silence, everybody bow your heads or close your eyes, and just things like that, I guess. So the vagueness is the part of the problem, and kind of letting them do what they want is a part of the issue as well. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I've had a lot of uncertainties about that, but going to private schools in general, they seem to be getting a lot of benefits. And are we collecting metrics on the performance of private schools so we can compare their performance to public schools?
A lot of the bigger schools, like I don't know what schools are in your area, sorry, but a lot of like the bigger like Catholic schools are in this area, like that are high performing, you know, they will release their stuff. They'll say like our graduation rate is so much better than the local schools. Our kids are reading at a higher level, blah, blah, blah. And that's usually what you would see for the larger places. But a lot of the small private schools, which you may not even realize there's a private school there because it's like a little room in a strip mall, there's no requirement for them to report. There's no assessment for these places. I don't have the link. I apologize, but I really encourage you to read I think it was the Orlando Sentinel. Oh, maybe it was Miami. Crap. I think it was Orlando Sentinel. They did an amazing investigative reporting piece on this in this past spring or summer. It may have been long. I don't know. COVID has messed with my mind. I don't know what day it is, to be honest, but it would look it up. It's really good. And they tell you like what's going on in these places, and we don't know because there are no requirements. They have been the one school that was a Seventh-day Adventist school. They recently fired, is in Orlando. They recently fired their music teacher because they found out he was gay. It's just, I don't think things like that should be happening, especially if they're very well qualified.
Well, the thing is, the schools justify getting state funds, saying that they can do better. And my challenge is, prove it. So you confirmed my fears. There is no proof.
Yeah, there is proof that like a lot of the private schools around here that, like the Tony types, I guess you could say, they do really great work, and their schools their students do exceed expectations, and they are better than public schools. But that's I guess the minority, and that's not the standard.
Well, I see that RDK is in some weird casino today.
Oh,
let's hear what he has to say.
Hi, I'm
Tell
with the
SpongeBob.
SpongeBob.
I love SpongeBob.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you provide us with like bullet points that when we call the representative, we can focus on those bullet points, make it easier for communication, or emails that, you put the point that are important and we can review and send it to the representatives?
I don't have anything offhand, but I think what you need to, when you call a rep or their staffers, you just say your name, where you're from, like your address or whatever, and say, I am opposed to X, Y, and Z because of this. It means to me, this is why. Briefly, just keep it brief. You just need to make sure that they are recording it, and then go from there. It doesn't have to be long. When you do these action alerts like that you get from American Atheists and the FFRF and whatnot, totally, take those as an example. They're written very well, but you can also customize them as well. You don't need to do the, just sign your name at the bottom and hit send. You can customize them to make them a little more personal, and just use those as an example of how to write an email. You just want to make it to the point, state your purpose, why it's important to you, why it's important to your community, the implications of this bill would be, so on and so forth, and then, sign off. I don't have anything personally. I think Judy may have had her hand raised. Maybe she has some.
Judy,
Well,
and
I can tell you
okay.
that we will start sending out bulletins and alerts, and with suggested text to include in your notes or in your calls. So we do that on, and we are not covering as many bills as Devon went over because we don't have the staff to do that, but we will be sending those out starting very soon since they're in committees now. And also I wanted to go back, I'm sorry, Rick, where'd he go? Rick Gold had something else to ask that I missed, and that was, the legislators have the right to submit only 7 bills. How do we work with them to submit the good bills?
I think what you need to do here is plan way far in advance. So senators have no limit. They can submit as many bills as they want, but the House people, the reps are limited to 7. It was 6, but now it's 7. So they really need to be careful about what they're going to put their name on. And if you have a bill in mind that you want to submit to a rep, I would recommend doing it the year before. You need to talk to them well in advance and get this on their plate. Be like, this is important, you know, the same spiel. Build a relationship with that representative, and then, you know, and also do your homework for them. If they know that this is going to be supported by so many people or whatever, then they're more likely to go with it. But if it's kind of like a fringe thing, they're less likely to put their name on it. So make this as, I guess, appetizing to them as possible, but do it way, way in advance. You need to get them on the same page as you well before the next session comes up, because there's actually deadlines. Even though there's a deadline to file a bill, there are deadlines before that. Like I learned this the other day. When you write a bill, you send it to the drafting office. The drafting office goes back and forth with you on it in terms of like the language and whatnot. And there's a deadline for when bills get to the drafting office, which was last week. There's so much that people just don't know, that if they're not like really engaged in this, then you have no idea. So yes, plan way in advance is my advice with that.
Thanks so much.
No problem.
Okay, next we have Scott, then Helen, then Jim Young.
Is this Great Scott?
Great Scott.
Great Scott. Okay.
Hey, this is
Hello.
Scott. I was just wanting to say that I keep my senators on speed dial, and
Good.
you can call them up. It's nice to have that you have a little blurb written down. Sometimes they'll ask your name. You don't have to give it if you don't want to. Sometimes I've had them ask my name, my address, and you know, some other little information, and then they send me a letter about it. So, and they're always polite, no matter how you stumble in your words. Even if you're starting to get a little angry about it, they're just polite as can be, and it's not really a big deal.
It's
That's
not.
all I had to say.
You're absolutely right. As I said, I'm one of those people that I hate talking on the phone. Whenever I have to call somebody, I actually make a script out to this day, because I have made so many mistakes on people's voicemails. So I have a script when I do this stuff. So I think having a script is just a great idea.
Yeah, it's
Right.
just a little script is nice
Helen
to have.
Is next? Is that it? Oh.
Next we have Helen.
Always. That's a great
Helen
idea.
had her hand up a while ago, and Andrea, one or the other. Let's see.
You're muted.
Yeah, where are they? Here it is. Let's see if.
Yeah. There we are. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah, this is Andrea, not Helen. I was a speech therapist in special education in the school district for 25 years. And to put a kid in any program, there has to be at least 25 pages of paperwork, a lot of it repetitious, and a million times calling parents in to do the slightest little thing. I was wondering if in the private religious schools, they have to adhere to the federal mandates and paperwork.
Federal, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There are a lot of exemptions, definitely at the state level, but I can't answer that because I just don't know about the federal level. I assume if there's
What do you know? What do you know about
a
the state
contractor
level?
that's associated with the government, it would have to be.
What?
What about at the state level? They don't
Yes.
have to have any, but they can bring anybody in to do anything.
Wow.
So, I mean, like I could go in to teach speech therapy, and I am not I can barely talk. So I'm not a good person to do that. So yes, but at the federal, as far as like a federal compliance, I'm not sure. I can't say that. But the state level, there are really no regulations, which is concerning.
I work for
Does
the
that answer your
wrong.
question?
I work for the wrong agency, I guess. I would have stayed longer if it was that easy.
Is James?
Next up, we have Jim Young and then Joe Reinhardt.
Okay.
I wanted to ask for clarification on the one bill that you mentioned in your presentation, which with the respect to a public disorder bill that it said something about statues and religion and what have you. And I could you expound on that? So because I don't really understand, what is that bill trying to do?
It's the point of it is to pretty much, and so there's a lot of, I obviously lean left. There's a lot of it stemmed from the Black Lives Matter protests from this last summer. It is trying to suppress protesting in general, and so it's been deemed unconstitutional by a lot of the now analysts that have gone over it, but it's still able to go through, and that then it'll be like adjudicated in court after the fact. And so one of there's a peaceful protest in front of the Capitol, and someone comes up unrelated to your group and just starts, I don't know, destroying something. They are then able to arrest everybody that's there, because that's now a violent mob or something. It affects everybody that's associated with that. And so the part that I put there about the religious symbols, I think there's just like special exemption for religious symbols, and I agree that they shouldn't, demolish or vandalize anything, but I just think it's bizarre that whenever I see the word religion put into bill text, I get like my spidey sense goes off a little bit. Like, why is that specifically there? Like, why is that picked it? Like, why is that highlighted specifically? I think there's some sort of implication that as a non-legal scholar, there's some implication there that's I'm not aware of, that I personally would like more clarification on as well.
Yeah, I'd like to have clarification whether or not it would be effective in shutting down peaceful protest.
So, and that's the example that was given, is like, if there is a peaceful protest, like people are just sitting holding signs or whatever, but it's associated, what they're saying is it's associated with, so someone unrelated to the group comes in and just takes, I don't know, demolishes a statue or just, hits a cop or something. Gives everyone the right to.
Like one white supremacist comes in to a Black Lives Matter demonstration and then, let's say, throws paint on something to vandalize it, and then runs away.
Then it's a public disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just an example. It can go either way. It's just that if one person's associated, if one person's doing is a bad seed or just a bad actor, it affects the entire group and the protest. And I don't know, the whole thing just makes my spidey sense just tingle all over. So it's also very vague.
On Artie just asked the question, would it make it illegal to burn a flag?
It is a flag. Well, it could be. I don't know. I want a lawyer on this right now. There is some weird language. It has to be a permanently maintained, or has the intention of being permanently maintained, I think is the verbiage or something. So I guess you could say there's a flag that it's on the flag post, and it's been there for however long. The flag post is going to remain there. If they burn that flag, that would be against this law, I guess. I don't know. Again, not a legal scholar, but I do think I'm intrigued by the implications of it, is where I'm going with it.
Well, okay, let's move on here, and so we get everybody in. And the man of infinite patience, Joe Reinhardt. Hold on, you're not. I don't hear you yet.
Oh, you're muted, Joe.
Okay, two quick points. One is with
Okay.
the ambiguity of the law you and Jim Young were just discussing, and that is the state doesn't really care. They can arrest you, and any attorney will tell you that not to worry about it. They'll get you out if it takes 40 years. So it has the same effect.
Oh,
and
sorry.
the other thing has to do with the way that the laws are written to favor religion. And the example I wanted to cite was Alabama, which had a discrepancy about child care. If you ran a child care organization, you had to be certified, all kinds of standards, background checks for your employees, and so on. If you ran one out of your church, you could run it out of a cesspool in your basement and have it taught by Jeffrey Epstein. Didn't matter.
Oh, okay.
So the cost.
You're right, though.
To the secular provider was much higher than it was for the religious provider, and the precautions didn't exist for the latter because they were religious.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Those are great points. Yeah, so whenever I go into like the bill tracker on the Senate site, as I said, the Senate site is better than the House site. I don't know if it's the colors, or I think it's because you can access the web page and not have to download the PDF for the bill text. But I always do a search for religion, religious, church, and I think you'd be shocked at how many exemptions there are for religious entities, or buildings, or clergy, or whatever. It is disturbing. I'm actually surprised there's not more, but there's just enough to make you, concerned, I guess.
Okay. Well, I think I will at last take my turn at the podium here and say that I certainly admire your devotion to the cause and your stick-to-itiveness in going before the state sullens to advocate as you do. I can recall that back in the late 70s, as a person representing the Atheists of Florida organization at that time, I made an appointment to testify before a committee, and it's a good thing I was prepared to deal with all of the abuse that came my way. They didn't want to know about what we were advocating for, which was, I think, better conditions for orange grove workers, pickers, and so forth. But they wanted to know all about my opinions about this Satan fellow and why did I worship him and so on and so forth. And how tasty are those kids anyway?
No.
But, well, I can't tell you, it was too long ago to tell you specifically, but it was certainly, they had little respect for a constituent who had come to give the views of an organization that was socially concerned about a serious issue. And I certainly hope things have improved since then. Have they?
I think they have. I mean, obviously, atheists have it's like we have the scarlet letter on us no matter what. And my goal is just to normalize atheism. I'm very out about it. I wear my my bag is covered in atheist buttons. They know who I am when I walk in. And I just make sure that they know, like, we're not like a small minority. Like, non-religious, unaffiliated people make up 26% of Florida's population alone, and that hasn't gotten through their heads yet. And I make that point every time I speak in front of them. It's like, we are your constituents. You answer to us, and I think that should be included. I believe Scott has the script. I think that should be included in every time you talk to a politician. It's like, we not just atheists, but like unaffiliated, people, religiously unaffiliated people, make up 26% of the population of Florida, according to the PRRI's most recent survey. And if you include religious minorities in that group, it's even higher. So making these specifically, Christian biased or very, right-wing biased laws that are favoring one religion over the other is kind of going against everything. It's kind of going against a significant portion of your constituency. So always make that point. I think it's really important to keep on saying that over and over again. And, make sure you say, I'm with the Atheists of Florida, I am with the Humanist of whatever, et cetera, et cetera. So I've never had anyone attack me per se, like you had at the committee meetings. No one's ever really talked back.
Those were primitive times.
But
Evidently, you're frozen.
Yes, I think we lost her.
Oh,
No,
am I back?
Here she is.
Okay.
She's back.
Oh, am I back?
You're back.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, what was that? I missed that.
Lost in the ether here.
Yeah, it wasn't anything, I don't think. Well, we're getting close to time for us to close down. Are there any other questions that anyone has before we leave? But there she's frozen. I'm frozen again. Any other questions before we close down for the evening?
Take advantage. We have an expert here.
Yeah,
I'm always happy to come back. You can
Good.
yell at me some.
You will be invited. You are invited.
Oh,
yes,
thank you.
absolutely.
Yeah, I think once
I
the session gets started, there's going to be a lot more fun stuff coming through, and so I love this stuff. I'm not very good at it, but I'm just going to keep on doing it because why
You
not?
did a very good job, and as Rick,
What I do now.
Rick O'Keefe just said, it was a very valuable information. Thank you.
Yes.
I know I
Well,
enjoyed
thank you
it
very
a great deal.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you so much.